Hello and welcome to With Wellner Anderson. This is the channel where we talk about economic, political, and we talk about business in simple terms. Today we're going to talk about what is Bitcoin. Now stop before you shut me off. There's a million videos out there explaining to you what is Bitcoin. I'm going to guarantee you that if you stick with me, you're going to understand enough and be enough about Bitcoin to feel comfortable. Okay, so I promise you that. Give me a thumbs up and give me a like and make sure you subscribe. First of all, let's start off with describing, what is money? Being a Bitcoin is money, right? So, money is something that has to be divisible. Cows cannot be money. Money has to be portable. Rocks, land, trees can't be money. It has to be a store of value, which means that it has to appreciate or at least maintain its value over time. It has to be fungible. In other words, a $5 bill is a $5 bill, but all diamonds are different. It has to be legal tender. In other words, this is the currency you use to pay your taxes with. Most importantly, or one of the most important things is it has to be scarce. It has to be durable. It cannot be bananas. But the most important thing about money is people have to accept it. They have to trust that it has value. Okay, so what is Bitcoin? It was created in 2009. It was an unknown author. Not really sure who created. There was a white paper done about that. A white paper is something that's done in the crypto world to explain how things operate. Bitcoin operates on a blockchain. Now, some of the things I'm going to talk about today is a function of the blockchain, but that's a whole nother conversation. And basically, it was created to send money from one point to another without a central bank or something else being involved. It has to be, the store of value is important. So, like gold or T-bills, they tend to store value. That's one thing Bitcoin has to struggle with. I talked about scarcity. There has to be a finite amount of coins. In Bitcoin, that is done. There's only going to be 21 million coins produced. Now, why is that important? Because it's a matter of supply and demand. If you have more of something, it's worth less. If you have less of something, it's worth more. One of the critical things about Bitcoin is decentralized. And that's important because you don't have a central point of failure. You don't have a central clearinghouse. There's a way that an actual transaction can be validated over a dispersed network. All the records on the Bitcoin are permanent records. They cannot be erased. They cannot be changed. As I said, there's no need for a third party to bring the element of trust. Let me give you an example. If you buy a house and you hire a company to do a title search, you're trusting them to do the search. So that piece disappears with Bitcoin. Now I'm going to tell you a brief story this should really make you understand how it works. About 400 years ago, there was an island called Yap Island. And this is somewhere I believe in Micronesia. I might be wrong. But their currency was something called a rhinestone. Now, the rhinestones were made on an island about 400 miles away from Yap Island. And they were beautiful stones. They were custom made. and each stone was unique. What would happen is they would put the stones on boats, bring them over to Yap Island where that stone did not exist, and place the stone down. And stones can't be moved from house to house. But the people knew through ledger who owned the stone. The stone never really transferred from one place to another. Why that's important is because that's how Bitcoin works. The title transfers between one place to another. What's interesting that did not happen or will not happen with Bitcoin that did happen in Yap Island is in 1871, an Irish captain found out about this, went to the island where the stones were furnished, had a whole bunch of them made, brought them back to Yap Island, and the economy just fell apart. That's just, in a Bitcoin environment, that should not happen. Okay. Bitcoin requires full node agreement. In other words, you have to be a full node on the network, and there has to be a process to resolve whether the writ or the record is a true block. Now, this is going to be an area that I know you've probably heard about something before. In order to make a Bitcoin like a piece of gold valued is, for example, if you're digging for gold, there's an investment of time you're going to get. Investment of time and money you're going to use to dig for gold. It's going to cost you an investment. That same concept is brought into Bitcoin. In other words, when you're digging for gold, you have to bring in certain equipment. You have to do certain surveys. In Bitcoin, the way that's done is something called proof of work. And in proof of work, there's something called hashing. And what hashing is a way you would use resources, which is computer power, which translates into money because computer power is not cheap, in order to win the hash and gain control of that Bitcoin. The problems with this is there's been tremendous environmental issues. They went as far as building computer facilities because they use so much energy in climates that are colder. We're moving towards something called proof of stake, which is a validation system where you don't have the environmental issues, but that's sort of the connection there. Let's talk about some other issues in terms that you're going to experience with that's happened recently. The crypto exchange FTX has created havoc. These are some other issues. Your private key, you got to make sure you don't lose your private key because that's your only device that shows that you have ownership of that. There are questions with global ledger systems. Are they too slow? Is Bitcoin the way it is large enough or fast enough to be real time? Other issues, there is anti-money laundering. They are making the facility so that corrupt assets can't use the Bitcoin network because of AML. The network is now posed to replace or compete against the current network that is being used for exchange of currencies, which is called the SWIFT network, which is an old network back from the 70s. Bitcoin's going to replace that. And why that's so important is because there's a whole different branch of the world in Africa and places like that that don't and never had access to banking. And decentralized finance, which is going to which will have in Bitcoin embedded in it, or some aspects of Bitcoin, not using a central site. In other words, to make it short and sweet, why would you build for new users old technology like the SWIFT system, as I mentioned from the 70s, when you have the technology today of 2020, you would give them the new technology. Now from that, you should really have a good understanding of what Bitcoin is. You know it's a currency. You know what are the attributes of it. You know a little about the history. I need you to give me a thumbs up. Need you to give me a subscription, ring the bell, and see you next month.